accept God, whatever that means to you.
Do I look like someone who cares what God thinks?
You're listening to The Fear of God, a podcast exploring the intersection between Christianity and the horror genre.
Hello, and welcome to another wonderful episode. I'm just calling it right now. It's going to be a wonderful episode of The Fear of God. I know it's my favorite podcast that drops on a Tuesday featuring two dudes, friends of 20 years named Nathan and Reed. I think it might be yours too. So whether it is or whether you're brand new to our show, welcome to the party. We are glad you are here. Talking to you right now is one of your hosts, Nathan. Typically with me is fellow co-host Reed, but he said something about having to loudly play with his rocket. I'm not really sure what that means, but I hope nothing bad happens as a result of, of said play. Reed! Oh! Woo! There you are, buddy. I was worried.
Just hush. Just hush. Don't say anything. Don't say anything about my rocket. Don't say anything about my volume. Don't say a word.
No. Nothing at all. Shh, we'll be quiet. This is you might call this a quiet place.
This is a quiet place. This episode is officially going to be the peace of God, and this is going to be the quiet place
this is all the talking we're going to do.
Exactly, and then it's going to be about 80 minutes of
quiet,
just quiet,
nothing,
an opportunity for you to reflect and to think about all the good things in your life. So
yes.
So yes.
Well, regardless, Reed, you're here. You're here.
I am.
And we're here. Thankfully, we're in our. We'll let them know we are in our soundproof bunker. We did spend a lot of time working on this bunker.
That is true.
Of this episode,
that is true.
So that we'd be safe during this very fraught time.
I'm currently standing under a running shower. So the waterfall will actually drown out any potential
You can
sound.
actually use your real voice. So before we tell them what we're talking about today, Reed.
Because they don't know. They don't know yet.
Right. Real quick, I want to do this. I want to shout out our listeners. You guys are amazing.
Indeed.
If you are brand new, it stands to reason that it's possible, if our good friend Mr. J.R. Forasteros loaned us any listeners last week, that maybe you're back today. We're very grateful for your presence. We're very grateful for our fans who've been with us for quite a haul. I am going to make an ask that if you enjoy our show, if you enjoy this show, we certainly enjoy producing it for you, and the silliness and occasional profundity that comes out of it. If you'd please consider not just leaving a rating or a review on iTunes, but also if you'd consider subscribing to our show on iTunes, it would mean a great deal to us. Ratings and reviews help when eyes are on the page. Subscribers actually help inflate it so that more eyes can get on the page. It's a bit of a snake eating its tail sort of scenario, this technology these days. Regardless, we're glad you're here. Go check out and leave a rating, a review, or subscribe to us. And Reed, before we move too far past this, dude.
Yeah.
Last week's episode, man.
I can't even. I cannot thank. Well, no, I can't. But I can't thank J.R. Forasteros enough for being with us, for being willing to basically let us sit on his couch for a good 2 hours, because I feel like. But no, like I've talked to him since we recorded.
A little bit of couples counseling.
It was a bit. It was a bit. But I've talked to him since then, and he said he very much enjoyed the conversation, and we hope that you, the listeners, did. We tremendously enjoyed having him on. If you have not yet heard that episode, maybe you didn't know what Empathy for the Devil was, or you didn't know exactly whether or not you should read the book beforehand, I'm going to encourage three things. First of all, go back, listen to the episode. It's about a really compelling and wonderful book called Empathy for the Devil, written by J.R. Forasteros. You do not have to read the book before hearing the conversation, so please go back and hear that conversation. It will probably make you want to read the book. And then third, please read the book. Buy his book. It's great. It's worth it. The second was you don't have to read the book before listening to the conversation.
Okay. You notated 1 and 3, and you did not notate 2, and so I was a little confused.
That's okay. That's all right.
Okay, good. I got it now. I appreciate you clarifying that. Oh, and another bit of business before we get to other bits of business, Reed. So, this is episode 84.
Yeah.
That we are recording right now and that we are sharing with the people right now. Although it is worth mentioning, if you were to go to iTunes right now, though we are properly on episode 84, according to iTunes, the total number of items in our Fear of God feed is 94.
That's true. That is true.
We'll sort of, we'll just have a maybe 2 month long, maybe a quarter of a year long celebration of episodes 100 times 5 or whatever. We'll just do the thing over and over.
Really, anything north of episode 90 is going to be counted as 100. So, because it's fuzzy. We time travel all the time, and we're bad at math. So it's okay. It's totally fine.
Speaking of bad at math, Reed, I just got to know what you watching. What are you reading?
Oh,
what are you listening to?
No.
So yeah, Reed.
Yeah.
It's time for that part of the show.
It's time for that part of the show
where we put on our cardigans and slip on our loafers and talk about what we're watching, reading, and listening to
with a pipe in hand. So I just finished, and I had listened to it a while ago, but I found myself revisiting it because I thought the material was really interesting. There are two podcasts that horror fans, if they haven't already heard of these, may find interesting. Both of them are featuring sort of deep dives into famous, iconic horror films. So the first season, if you will, was Inside Psycho, and the second season was Inside the Exorcist. I'm remiss to I've forgotten the podcast creator's name, which I feel really bad about, but basically he has done, rather than it just be a series of just talking points or just exploring even just an opportunity to see like a big behind the scenes thing, he has created rather a 7-episode creative drama, if you will, that basically takes you on imaginative stories about the making of those two films, imaginative conversations. He does have plenty of trivial facts about Psycho and The Exorcist sprinkled into. They're not, each season is distinct unto itself. So Psycho is just about Psycho and Exorcist is just about The Exorcist. And he promises podcast listeners that he'll have another iconic horror film coming sometime in June. But I listened to it again.
So is it when you say you refer to seasons, which implies multiple episodes, is it multiple episodes based on that one movie type of thing?
Yes. So 7 episodes based on Inside Psycho, 7 episodes based on Inside the Exorcist, and they're done in a sort of a radio drama format, which makes it for really compelling and interesting listens. And it merits, as I just did, going back and re-listening to them again. So I figured some of our horror fans in the audience might enjoy checking those out. They're pretty brief, and it's just called Inside Psycho and Inside the Exorcist, and I highly recommend them both.
Very cool. Were you tipped off to those by someone, or were you just browsing the old iTunes looking for something to listen to?
So I stumbled on Inside Psycho just by browsing iTunes, and then might have eventually stumbled on it myself, but our friend of the show, Blake Collier, personally messaged me and was like, dude, the new Inside season is all about Inside the Exorcist, so you need to hop over and check that out, because he knows, as all of our listeners do at this point, how much I love that film. So yeah, that was how I stumbled across them.
So I have been watching the television show Legion. The Noah Hawley developed, Dan Stevens starring Legion. Have you seen this at all?
I've not seen one episode yet.
Well, do you know anything about it other than just
I know that
Legion?
he is a Marvel property, right? He's a Marvel character. And
Indeed, yes.
and that he has multiple personalities, or that there's multiple people, that's part of his. I don't know if you call it power or
to answer that too directly is to spoil elements of the show.
Okay, all right.
But well, what's interesting is so as a at this point 25 almost 30-year comic reader, I'm very knowledgeable of a lot of what's out there, and so this was one of those properties, as occasionally happens, where you're like, what? Legion? Why? It's so random.
Yeah.
To build a major serialized piece of material on, but I should have been a bit wiser to the fact that Noah Hawley is in charge of it, who did all of the Fargos.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Most of those,
yes.
if not all of them.
I saw all 3 seasons.
He wrote the book, I believe, called After the Fall that I referenced on here about a year ago.
Oh, that's right.
Very, very talented guy, and so I should have been more, hip to that. I did watch the pilot about 4 months ago, and really was impressed with the pilot. It's a fascinating piece of work, but just didn't emotionally really plug into it, and so kind of let it lie, and didn't really bother with it again until about a week ago. And then the first season is 8 episodes. And I will say this, episodes 5 and 7 of that season are some of the most bonkers, just jaw-droppingly impressive technical feats of television I've ever watched. I mean, they are...
That's high praise.
Staggeringly inventive and creative. The season ends a little more conventionally than I would have loved based on how artfully the rest of the season is, but it is...
I gotcha.
For only 8 episodes, it is well worth your time. I mean, there are moments where you're like, I don't even know what I'm watching, but I'm so impressed with what I think might be happening that I'm along for the ride.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, I definitely recommend Legion. The second season has begun. I have not plugged into it personally yet.
All right.
Because I've been traipsing through the old MCU with my kiddos too.
So that's right.
It's only so much time in a day.
Yeah. See, by the time this airs, most of our listeners will have seen Infinity War already, probably.
And at least one of our hosts.
Yeah, at least one of our hosts. Our other host is probably not going to get out to the theater for maybe a week or so. So I'm going to have to avoid spoilers like the plague. But
they all die.
That's what I hear. Oh, speaking of die,
Black Panther saves the day. Yeah,
he will, of course.
Right.
Speaking of die, so I have to mention this, and then I want us to move on because, man, I have stuff to say about today's film. So I'm extremely excited, eager, chomping at the bits, rabid for the October 19th release of the new Halloween film, which I've been following since they announced it, and I was distressed to a small degree to find out, and this is always tenuous news when you hear this, because any number of things could happen, to find out that it tested poorly. So they did a rough cut to some audiences, and it tested poorly. I have not been able to, because I don't really want to know very many spoilers. I've not done a deep dive into why. And I don't really want to, but I did find out because it was shared on a couple of websites, that just the headline that it tested rather poorly. Now it comes out in October, and it's April right now when we're recording this. So the whole reason they do a test screening is to see how audiences are reacting to it and see if they need to change something or if they need to switch something up. So by the time it comes out, they might take most of the audience's suggestions and fix that. And then notoriously, as we always, we don't always reference this because it's a strange, very specific point to reference, but Seven, which was released very much in its original form that it was first test screened terribly because of the audience that test screened it, because they invited people to test screening by saying featuring for Seven, they invited people, said featuring Brad Pitt from Legends of the Fall and Morgan Freeman from Driving Miss Daisy. And then that group was assaulted by Seven. So naturally that movie tested poorly. So I don't know if it's one of that, sort of one of those sort of problems, or if it's that there really are difficulties with the film. But I'm like, no, please be good. Please be good.
To read that, I am sorry to hear that for you because I know this means a lot to you. I know watching people get hacked to death by Michael Myers is a significant experience.
It's usually the highlight of my Halloween.
Yeah, and now it's spoiled. It's over. The candy's rotten.
There's no going back now.
You know, someone you opened your bag and you were like, I got a rock.
20 times. I got a rock.
Yes,
I got a rock.
So that has been another episode, everyone, of What You Watching, What You Reading, What Are You Listening To?
What you listening to?
You know what I love? I love that, one, we've got really engaged listeners who, you know, have and will likely post some ratings and reviews. I love how many of those ratings and reviews reference what you watch and what you're reading. It makes me really happy that we've got a bit. We can take it on the road. We can just do the Nathan and Reed What You Watching show.
It's our greatest hits is a single.
Right. It'd probably be just as dumb as they normally are. Today.
Oh, man.
Oh, Lackey, my friend.
Today
we are discussing the John Krasinski written and directed and starring. I was about to cut.
The Renaissance man, that guy.
I was about to say something negative about him because I'm like, man, come on, man. Come on,
share some of the
Krasinski. No, it's all good. I actually really, really, really like John Krasinski. But we are discussing A Quiet Place, rather unquietly, I might add.
Indeed.
So, A Quiet Place, I first saw the trailer for, and I thought, I'll reserve judgment. That looks, you know how sometimes you'll see a trailer for a movie, or whether you see a trailer or just hear about the concept, and you're like, okay, high concept. I can kind of go with that. That's you know, like high concepts can be tight wires though. You know, high wires.
It's true.
There's tight rope and there's high wire. I just combined them. I'm sorry. So
tight wires.
Right. Tight wires or high ropes. High ropes course. A high concept can be
both sound very uncomfortable.
A high ropes course. You know, there's a zip line, and those people probably could have used a zip line.
That's terrible. Oh, that's terrible.
So yeah, we are discussing A Quiet Place. I did see the trailer. It was very high concept, and I thought that looks worth a glance. And it was really fun the weekend it came out because it was spring break here where I live, and my kids were out at grandparents for the week. We were doing a bunch of work on our house, and it was Friday night, and my wife was like, you know, you've worked really hard, and that meant a lot. She said, is there like a movie you want to go to? Do you want to go out to the movie?
Oh, you know, that's very sweet.
Like, yeah, that's like marital gold right there, you know?
That's right.
But I wasn't paying attention. It was probably about 8:00 that evening, and I was like, it's late. And I wasn't thinking about the fact that Quiet Place had released. So I didn't really, I didn't honor the offer that evening. And probably at about 10:00 that night, I was scrolling Twitter, and old Uncle Stephen King, posts
yes, indeed,
like a single tweet about his love of A Quiet Place. And I was like, oh my God, that came out. I forgot.
No, now
I gotta go. And the next day, at about, this is just a fun story to me, so that's why I'm sharing it. At about 11:30, kids are out of town. Wife's giving the full green light. It's a matinee, so it's cheaper. I was like, I'm gonna go see A Quiet Place, and I pay my bucks. I go in. I don't know that I've ever, in almost 20 years of friendship with you, done this. In a theater, I texted you in the middle of the movie.
It's true. You did.
That's how energized I was watching A Quiet Place.
Sure did.
I texted you, and I had you were, and I'll let you tell your side of this Rashomon story. You were at your wife's parents. And
yes,
I had no clue what your awareness, thoughts, knowledge, or plans were for A Quiet Place. But I texted you, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but it was basically like, you have to go see this, like right now. Like,
go see it now.
You need to go.
Yes.
Because usually you and I actually almost intentionally make a habit of not covering on the show very of the moment stuff. So it's pretty rare for us
By
to
design.
be doing what we're doing. But there are few more proximal experiences of us watching movies together than us watching a movie 300 miles apart on the same day, the same movie, right? You know,
It's true.
It
true.
was almost like watching it together.
almost because the last time that happened was Mother, but that was a plan. Like we planned to.
Right.
Mother had already been released.
Right.
It was released to video on demand.
Right.
And so we were like, okay, well, we're in the same state. Let's watch this movie and we'll talk about it. And so we did that. But this was such a rare instance because if you remember, I texted you back when you said, hey, you need to go see A Quiet Place like today. And when I texted you back, I said, I already have tickets for a showing in like an hour. So yeah, it was,
That's great.
It was really, really great.
For me personally, and as a final button, and then you can talk about yours, like, I want to say I laughed. I can't remember if there's actually any comedic bits in the movie, but I mean, I cried. I cried. And I was exultant. It was a very... Matt Murray made fun of me for describing my experience. He was like, you experienced a lot of movies like that. I was like, well, no. Not... I get what you're saying. I'm a drama queen. But no, this was different. So no, it was a very visceral experience. We'll get into the details of the movie. But yes, that was my... I haven't been able to get back, but I actually really would like to get back to A Quiet Place.
Oh, I would love to see it again. I wanted to prior to our recording, and timing just didn't quite work out for it. But oh man, I want to see it again so bad. This was a really special film. I can remember seeing films that I've thought that was great, and that was really. It's the kind of thing that comes along so rarely, where it pushes all the buttons because this is an immensely popular film. I know so many people who are self-professed like not very big avid horror fans who have seen this film and love it. It also seems to be pleasing all the horror fans.
Sure.
It's pleasing all the critics. Like this is one of those really special, rare films where it's this great cohesion of theme and story and genre and timing and just everything about it. Concept, yes, everything. Everything about it works so exceptionally well, and yeah, I did. I was so thrilled to be able to see it in the theater, and
did your wife appreciate it?
She didn't go to see it with me. I went to see it whenever I go up north, just in case they listen to this. My buddies Ken and Kyle, we kind of have a little guys thing whenever I go up north, and we've got a free afternoon. We like to go see a scary movie because none of our significant others like to go see scary movies. So,
Ken and Kyle, be sure when you hear this episode to go rate or review us and to subscribe to the Fear God podcast. Suddenly, Nathan has become an absolute shill for his own show.
I know. Suddenly, you're our marketing department. Marketing department, like the soul.
Excuse me. Now it's a time for another word from our sponsor. This week's episode brought to you by A Quiet Place, distributed by Paramount Pictures. I don't really.
Boy,
know.
I wish it was brought to us by A Quiet Place because on that, I mean, the budget was like $17 million, which of course I don't have $17 million. But
there you go.
I remember, and this is why I'm so happy about this and its success is it was tracking leading up to opening weekend. It was tracking for cinephiles who may not know what I'm referring to is basically that it's a predictor based on buzz, social media buzz, word of mouth buzz, advertising, footprint. How much do they think it will do? And it was tracking in the week prior to opening weekend, was tracking at about 20 million. I think the Wednesday or Thursday before it released, they were saying, no, we think it actually might make as much as 60 million. As of this recording, it has gone north of 200 million.
Oh, wow.
So it is, yes, great. It is a bona fide hit. And I couldn't be happier for John Krasinski. I don't think you have, as of yet, watched The American Office, but I loved him on The American Office, and which is just called The Office, but I'm, distinguishing it from the British version. Because
America's better at everything.
Wow! Yes, we win. So he had directed two films prior to this. One of which I saw. I saw his directorial debut, which is called Brief Interviews with Hideous Men, and it's a drama. It's like an independent drama, and it is disjointed. It's a bit clunky. I have not seen his second film, which is called Meet the Hollers and is supposedly, I guess, an independent comedy, but I don't know precisely what that film is, but from what I understand, it is also regarded in a similar vein where it's somewhat clunky. So when I saw the trailer, I was like, really excited by the trailer, really excited by the concept, but, and I love John Krasinski, and I'm like, I've got a lot of goodwill for him as a performer, but I knew that his initial directorial works had not been terribly well received, so was sizably appreciative and just elated to see how effective and phenomenal this film is. I have so much praise to heap on this film. Listeners and co-host may have to bring me down because I have just so much praise to heap upon this film. I loved it so very much, and I'm so happy for Krasinski.
Well, and it's Krasinski deserves much credit, but let's not give others pass more around. I mean, Emily Blunt is amazing.
She's outstanding.
I've enjoyed her for a number of years, so she's great. Those young performers are really strong. It has that.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
I think one of the things that's really just special about it, I think you used that word a minute ago, and I would definitely echo that. That is, it's almost got this Amblin Spielbergish kind of feel, but doesn't feel nostalgic, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
it's got those kind of touchstones, those kind of touch points, but from my understanding, Jurassic Park was a bit of an inspiration for him in some of the scenes, and in fact, apparently the silo scene when the kids are at the mercy of the alien creature was meant to be a direct sort of homage to the raptor sequence towards the end of Jurassic Park and stuff like that. So, I can just see a lot of that there. I think what I was trying to say a minute ago in terms of its specialness, it feels edgy enough as a thriller to really be genuinely thrilling, but not so either horrific or genuinely frightening and scary that you're turned off by it, by the general audience, So I think it really hit a very sweet spot in that regard. Although I've already referenced him once in this longtime listener, Matt Murray. He took his wife to see it and said she almost had a nervous breakdown during it. So,
Oh my gosh! Well, there's some scenes that are just relentless. I mean, they're just absolutely terrifying. And so a couple of things just in quick succession. You praised the performers. So a couple. I mean, maybe consider these trivial bits if you want to. A couple of things that I found out. So first of all, I have to give a shout out to one of our listeners, Hillary. You are not forgotten. She is probably going to claim. Hillary's a coworker of mine, and she is probably going to claim credit for us doing an episode. But I told her already that we had long decided to do this episode before she.
It was all you, Hillary. It's all you. Yeah. And go leave a rating or a review, and
she already
subscribe.
has.
Okay,
she
great. Thank you, Hillary.
Stop. Now's the point at which I have to calm you down.
I know,
I'm going to throw a wet blanket.
That was meant. That one was meant to be a silly, as was the.
It was a silly.
The buddies one too. I was just being.
I made a silly. Okay, so but the reason I'm referencing her right now is because she does sign language. She knows it, and she occasionally interprets at certain events, and Millicent, the actor who plays the deaf daughter, she is genuinely deaf in real life, and brought a verisimilitude to the entire proceedings regarding their sign language, not only in the accuracy of their inflection, but also in the specificity of it, because some people may not think about the fact that, as in all language and dialects, when people sign, they have a kind of visual dialect to how they sign, to how they make the words, the formation, the way they move their hands, how quick, how slow, everything to that, and each of them kind of have their own distinct sign language dialect, if you will. I'm not sure if I'm using the right word, and Hillary will probably, razz me about it. But the other thing that I found really impressive in general is, so Krasinski, I don't know why, or if he didn't do this for his previous works or whatever, he supposedly, if trivial bits are to be believed, he did a ton of research on recent horror films like Get Out, The Witch, like you mentioned, Jurassic Park, some of his personal favorites, he watched these films and took detailed notes about when he got tense and why he got tense. So when he was revising the screenplay, was thinking specifically about some of those things when he was revisiting, because the script was originally crafted by two of the credited writers, Brian Woods and Scott Beck, and both of them had conceived sort of the skeletal elements of the story. But when Krasinski got it, which I believe he just had acquired as a potential starring vehicle, and so then he and very specifically Emily Blunt were like, I think this is a story I need to direct. And Emily Blunt was like, if you direct it, can I please play the wife? Can I please do that? And so then everything just sort of came together and culminated in the finished product that we got. But I appreciated so much, and you can see it in the film, that there was clearly a lot of attention to the functioning workings of how to create a solid suspense film.
Sure.
That there's a lot of good craftsmanship happening in this film. And I don't know if that's just a credit to his particular research this time around, or some innate skills, or if it's built into the concept, which I do think is an element of it, or the narrative beats of the script. I think it just all works together, but I appreciated that so much care and attention went into it, and I think that translates on the screen. I think you see the end result of exactly how deliberate and intentional the filmmaking process was. So yeah, it's phenomenal.
in the spirit of that, if we can, it feels like this particular film, I don't know if it's just because it is really more, it's deep, but it's more popcorn in design. I'm kind of compelled to, let's do our traditional kind of likes, dislikes, scares sort of thing. We can sort of blend that categorically together, but just a more pedantic look at some of the surface elements that we really appreciated, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, let's go for it.
I will say, dude, I was, simply because all I'd seen was that initial trailer, and the trailer does a great job of establishing mood, but not being very spoilery. You don't really know much.
Yeah.
And in fact, you get the impression, at least from this initial trailer, and I don't remember subsequent ones, you get the impression that they're going to play with vocal, with lessened vocals, but the trailer doesn't really tell you, hey, there's not really dialogue in this movie. You know what I mean? So that was kind of fun.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly.
That was kind of fun to actually have that rolling experience of like, oh, sure, this is awesome. This is really cool.
Oh, yeah.
I love that they're kind of committing to this. But all of that said, I was utterly unprepared for the loss of the son in the teaser, and and to the point that I was like, oh no, this is not a good feeling I'm having.
Yes.
And not just that, but that, to your point about his directorial execution, that scene is fantastic. I mean, the way the
so
scene
affecting.
itself plays with sound, and the daughter's inability to hear what's happening behind her, but the way they hold that card. Do you remember the way you're like, everyone's walking on the little bridge or what have you, and you do a little close up, a little close shot of each family member, and then it cuts to her facially straight on, and you see him in the background, and you And oh my gosh. And then it cuts to her seeing Krasinski run just full bore. Oh my gosh. That was, just riveting and terrifying and heartbreaking all in one 1 minute sequence.
And devastating. That was one thing where I've said on this show before that I'm somewhat protective about what films I invite my wife to see.
Sure.
And I remember sitting there thinking in the theater, like in the first 10 minutes, I'm like, okay, maybe not, not this one, which is a real shame because it's a powerful film. But it's so devastating because you think. You're kind of propped up to think like, okay, he's going to get him. This is going to set up, the threat or whatever, but he's going to get it. The fact that he doesn't make it, the fact that and when the way the shot is framed, you see Krasinski running.
Yes.
Then you see the boy, his son, in the foreground, and then whatever it is, we don't know at that point, catches him, and then it's just a quick. It probably happens in about a second and a half when he catches him, and when he drags him out of frame, just like a very quick, almost a jump scare, clutches him out of frame. You see Krasinski like put on the brakes with his legs.
Sure.
Like you see him just sort of like stop. And in that brief moment, and of course then it cuts to the title card, but it's like so much is conveyed just in that one particular moment.
Right.
Because any other scenario, the dad is going to be like, "Give me back my son," and he's going to run after the thing and try to fight him. But
it's a total loss.
Exactly. But the fact that he just breaks, and it's just there's so much devastation just in that one moment, because it's like, okay, well, it's done, it's over.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, it is so heartbreaking and devastating.
It's funny.
Did you notice? Well, just real quick.
Yeah.
When in the scene when they're in the grocery store,
the potato chips.
Oh my goodness, what a great touch. What a great touch that all the food is gone, but the bags of potato chips are still there, because they would be incredibly noisy. I was like, man, that's fantastic. That's a great touch. Really
did you know, this is actually not what I was about to say a second ago. I could be totally wrong on this, but it makes sense. I saw a little blip, social media being what it is, we scan more than we read, which is a terrible state of culture and society, but that's a whole other conversation. I think initial versions of this film were set in the Cloverfield setting.
I've heard the same thing.
Okay,
I've heard the exact same thing.
It makes sense, and I kind of dig it.
Yeah. The only thing that I would kick against it, two things. Three. I'm sorry. I'll make this brief. First is, it does sort of jack up the continuity of the Cloverfield world, because that doesn't exist for any of the other films. Like the whole, you have to be silent, So there's that. Second thing is, I'm almost at a state right now. Listeners know my affection for Netflix's release of Cloverfield Paradox, even though Cloverfield Paradox is not necessarily a film quality enough to deserve that level of awesomeness, but it was a really awesome thing that Netflix did releasing it. But I'm kind of resistant now at this point to every foreign thing being in the Cloverfield universe. It's like, part of me thinks it's cool, but then I'm like, okay, guys, like, everything doesn't have to be in the Cloverfield universe, and that's
where is the Cloverfield? I mean, is there just this thing out there? Like, is it a person? Is it the monster? Do they come from the planet called Cloverfield?
I just don't know.
It's a field of clovers?
Yes, exactly. 4-leaf. So basically the other thing is, like we've talked about with The Babadook, with The Witch, with several other things, this is one of those rare horror films that I don't want to see a sequel.
Right. Yes.
I don't.
Totally.
I don't want to see anything more.
Right.
I don't want it to be connected to anything else. I want it to be this beautiful, wonderful, horrific little fable and quasi-inspiring, and we'll get to all of that. I love that it is just a thing unto itself. And I really, in my, heart of hearts, really just want it to stay that way, because I think it's really special.
I'm totally with you. And all I was going to say earlier is, and man, I wish we had this conversation 3 weeks ago, just because the energy was so much fresher. But you were talking about your wife seeing or not seeing the movie, and I got so activated by my solo outing of viewing it that I was like, man, this is the kind of movie that's just edgy enough that I think she would like it. So I didn't spoil the whole movie, but I definitely told her, I was like, this may turn you off, but I'm going to tell you, in a world where you do see this movie, you'll be mad at me if I did not tell you about that opening scene. Sure. Because that starts us off on the stakes are suddenly through the roof.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Well, and speaking of those stakes, and this is the other reason why I don't know if I will ever ask my wife to watch this film, is because those stakes being what they are, and they are powerful, the fact that we lose that first child in the opening scene makes the scene where she is there alone with the baby.
Oh my God.
We're all trying in the theater to be as quiet as humanly possible, because that's which by the way, before I make my other point, like, it was phenomenal.
Yes.
To be in a theater where the concept of the film eked off the screen and eked into the theater, because we're all palpably like not moving, being careful with our candy and with our popcorn, and we're all trying very hard not to make noises, like, and everybody's like, please God, nobody cough and nobody fart, because like this is gonna be just like terrible. So, but the stake raiser of that opening moment, and then when she's alone underground and that creature has gotten in with the baby, I was on the edge of my seat literally, but I was whispering over and over again, God, please no, please no, please no, because it looks like as you're first looking at it, the thing's gone.
Remember, like, I love this movie. I really like. It is 10 p.m. on Eastern Standard Time, and when we get done this conversation, if I could, I would watch it. That's how excited I am. That scene is so strong, and two things. As my 7-year-old, two questions. She always does things in twos. Number two. See, that was an appropriate use of that bit.
Is there ever one, though?
You know what's really funny? As a very mild asterisk here, about 2 episodes ago, you called me out on how I number two everything. You're like,
I sure
you do
did.
that all the time. You know what's really funny about that is maybe like the next day after we recorded, I was listening to the one recording immediately prior, and I did it, and I was like, "Dadgummit! Lackey's got
I am correct.
Got my number, and it's a 2, and I've got a terrible memory, and oh my God, what is wrong with me? I go to the same Austin Powers 1997 well over and over again. Anyway, I digress. So I have loved a couple of these movie-going experiences recently. Black Panther had such an amazing theater-going experience with that movie. Then similarly, like you described, I mean, and it wasn't a huge crowd. Like I said, it was middle of the day on a Saturday, but it was a decent crowd, and we were all just utterly engrossed. And that scene that you're describing in the bunker when the water has flooded... Because if you recall, I think the sequence is she's, we're kind of now down there with her in her POV, and you see the little cradle resting on the surface of the water. Well, then the creature moves in the corner and revealing itself. Then there's this slow descent under the water. And I remember being like, oh my God! It's so scary. What's going to happen to the little baby?
Oh my gosh!
So yes, that scene is amazing. And actually, what I wrote down is swimming alien reveal in basement with baby. The old man in the woods. Oh my goodness!
That was intense. And again, just talking about Krasinski's out there with his child.
Yep.
And they're just doing the best they can to stay quiet, to stay calm. And then in a world like this, it says so much, and we can dive more into this if we want to in themes, but it says so much. It's like, okay, well, I've lost my wife. We would presume that old man, that's his wife. Right. It's like, I've lost my wife, and that shot where the old man is looking up at him, and then Krasinski is begging him, begging him with his eyes, with everything. He's got his finger up to his mouth, like, please, please don't say anything. Don't make a noise, don't make a sound. And then the guy is just like, screw you, screw it all, screw me, screw everything, and then just howls, just screams. And it is nerve-wracking, and it has a lot to say about the power of sort of devastating and these, we talk about these sort of apocalyptic situations, end of the world kind of things, but, and again, this is really skirting up to the edge of theme, but we talk about these apocalyptic sort of scenarios, but there are cases, and we learned this from The Leftovers and all the situations with The Leftovers, where it's like, apocalypse doesn't have to be global. I mean, Leftovers was global, but apocalypse can very much be a private, personal thing.
Right.
Where it's like, oh yeah, your world itself has just imploded and fallen apart. And now what do you have left? What is there? And what happens next? What do you do next? And so A Quiet Place, I think, skirts up to those kinds of conversations of, like, for instance, with the Abbott family, they lost this child. They lost this youngest child. And one of my buddies that I was sitting with leaned over and whispered very carefully, because we whisper very carefully in A Quiet Place. But he leaned over and asked a very legitimate question, like, why would you bring a baby into this world? Why would you do that? And I thought, and this is one of the reasons why I became so emotionally invested into that, is because I thought, like, dang, just that simple little touch, like, in a world where you must be silent and quiet at all costs, you're going to bring a baby who everybody automatically knows, like, baby doesn't know any better and is just going to cry.
Right.
Is just going to cry.
Scream.
And scream and just make noises and just laugh. Like, why would you do that? And I found it, I don't even have words in this moment to wrap around it. Maybe I will before episodes end, but I found it profound to just the fact that this couple is choosing to bring a baby into this world, because if there was ever a scenario
where you don't do that,
in which you would say, like, oh no, this is not the place to bring a baby into this world, it would be one where, like, you must be silent at all costs. And that racked me, Nathan. It was really incredible. I
really want to come back to that idea, because you're introducing some solid theme there that I think subconsciously I'd picked up on, but that and the imagery. This is another moment where my wife would be quite on edge. Again, it's not as harrowing as the loss of the son at the front, but the imagery of them putting that little gas mask on that little baby and putting the cover on the sleeve, like this juxtaposition of fragility and brutality. Yes, well, let's pin that for just a moment, because
sure.
I mean, I Reed Lackey. Can I just say, I don't know that there have been. It might be a top 5 of the last 5 years moments in a movie of the confluence of sequences that resulted in the 3 minutes of Emily Blunt giving birth with the alien in the hallway and the other son setting off the rockets.
Oh my gosh!
Had you been next to me and I had the moral fortitude of non-judgmental peer next to me, I would have stood up out of my seat and cheered in A Quiet Place at that moment. Yes. I was so... Yes. I mean, I felt like someone had lit a rocket under my seat. I wanted to just leap and cheer, because they've established their willingness to kind of go dark with that opening scene. Yes. So you really don't know. I mean, like, I've got pretty decent faith that the movie's not going to off the pregnant mom while she's giving birth in the tub, because that'd be really jacked up. But
I didn't know.
I just don't know. And I don't know how they're getting out. And Krasinski's kind of lost in the woods at that particular moment. And then the son sets off those fireworks. And my goodness, that was such an exhilarating moment. And
it's powerful.
And what an amazing experience. Like, referencing something like a Jurassic Park, which came out in 97. No, 94, when we were 15 years old. And what that did to us as teenagers, and how riveting that was, and how much those sort of imagery stays with you. What a glorious feeling as an adult moviegoer to be that plugged in and enraptured in what's happening. Yeah. You know what I mean? So uncynically that they pull off that kind of Rube Goldberg sequencing and editing and sound design to pull off that moment. My gosh, it was glorious.
Oh, it was phenomenal. And I heard that...
What'd you hear in The Quiet Place?
This is now probably a colloquial story, not an apocryphal one, that basically that was done, that whole entire sequence from Emily Blunt's part was done in one take.
I did hear that for her.
And that as soon as the take was over, she dropped character and was just like, "So what's for lunch?"
Right. Yeah.
That was just an actor being
right,
an actor.
Right.
But yeah, that whole sequence. Everything about the film builds so effectively onto itself. I don't feel like there is a singular wasted element. The hearing aid. The whole fact that their daughter is deaf, and that the father has been lovingly and painstakingly experimenting with hearing aids to try to get some sound into his daughter's ear, and he gives it to her, and she's like, "This won't work." And I wondered at that moment, I was like, well, obviously something's going to play out here, but probably more on a character perspective. And it turns out it's character and narrative that all gets paid off. But I just feel like there's so many wonderful things, like when she's dragging the laundry up the stairs, and then
the nail,
and she upends that nail, and we're all sitting there like, somebody's stepping on that nail, and sweet Lord,
and then terrible.
Little did I know that it would be her stepping on the nail after her water broke, and now it's that entire scene. Like, you want to talk? I don't know if it's possible for stakes in a movie to be more severe than that.
Right.
For stakes in a movie to be like, okay, in a world where you cannot make a sound, this woman is about to give birth, and she has just stepped on a nail. Like, the amount of pain going through her right there at that moment is just unimaginable. And she can't make a sound for her own life's sake. It's just, the stakes in that film were just unbelievable.
Well, and if we can, so we're raving. I do want to bridge us to theme. So, in an emotional sense, I'm kind of a pumpkins all fives on this one. There are a couple of little beats that
Shut up.
I think
they're not. Don't say anything bad about this film. I'm teasing you.
I know. I knew, because you've heard this, but I want us to tease it out a little bit for the people. These bullet points that I think would take my pumpkin hyperbolic fives to actual sixes. Two things. One, more technical. One, a bit more narrative and emotional. So the movie is so perfectly wound as a machine. You know, all the pieces are clicking and well oiled, and the threat is well established. The conceit is high. The concept is taut. The characters are real. You know, you could make, if you really wanted to quibble, a little bit of a ding on the sort of relative plausibility of just how perfectly they've pulled off some of their systems, but whatever. I don't really care about that because I was just so bought in. I was so, like, not knowing where the movie was going to go and not knowing we were going to get that magnificent scene. And I use that word for all its power in the bunker between Emily and John's, their verbal scene.
Oh my gosh.
Not knowing that was coming, I didn't anticipate this bothering me until I got to that scene. I'm not a fan of... I'm a perfectly fine fan of what gets communicated. I'm not a fan of the verbalization that happens between the father and the son at the waterfall. Only because for a movie called A Quiet Place, and for a technical execution that eliminates all vocalizations, inclusive of speech, except for two moments or two scenes, those sequences have to land hard. And one lands exceptionally hard and well and strong and potently and formidably. And the other one lands fine and slightly dilutes the scale a little bit for the other, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
No, it does, and I don't even think I really disagree with that. The rumor mill is that the original script had, and I don't know what the line was, but the rumor mill is that the original spec script had only one line of dialogue, spoken dialogue, in the entire film. And there is a otherworld scenario in which I would love a version of A Quiet Place where the only spoken line of dialogue at all is when they look into the cradle and say, "It's a boy."
Yeah.
There is an otherworld scenario in which if that were the only line of spoken dialogue in the film, I would love it all the more. I don't disagree with what you're saying. It didn't really dilute it for me. But to your point, I do think that it would have been significant if every other thing had been communicated by sign language.
Well, and it just feels like
one scene between the two of them.
Yeah, and I guess it just feels like such an odd, and maybe a rewatch will yield a greater depth of appreciation for the scene between the father and the son, in terms of their verbalizing to each other. I just don't know that there's enough there for it to be as valuable as it would be in a movie called A Quiet Place for them to talk based on how strong that bunker scene is between the two of them.
Sure.
I don't know, sort of like what you're saying. I just wish, again, I loved the movie. I loved the experience of watching the movie.
Sure. Yeah.
I sort of wish they just sort of pulled the punch there a little bit more and just not had them talk, the father and the son there.
Right.
And you and I texted back and forth about your, citing that you read about the rumor of what might have been the only line of dialogue like that. I love the dialogue we get in that scene.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Between John
absolutely.
and Emily. I do think your version that you read is, if they followed the emotional heartbeat of what the movie does, actually, like in that scene.
Yeah, sure.
If you could have, if they had found a way to pull that off emotionally with just those lines, my goodness, that would have been just insane.
That would have been staggering. Yeah.
My other big obstacle, and we can address it and then move on to thematic stuff because it does kind of bridge that gap. The Blunt version, Blunt. Emily Blunt.
I get it.
Yeah, sure. The straightforward version is I didn't like Krasinski dying. I felt like the second it happened, not knowing what the movie was going to be about, and not knowing what I was actually going to get from the movie, and being so engrossed and so enthralled and so energized and so heartbroken and so on the edge of my seat, it was possibly the only moment in the movie where I was like, oh, that feels like a misstep. I don't know exactly what to feel totally while you're watching it, but it feels like a struggle to get behind. And I think the more I've pondered it, again, I love what we get in the final product, but to me, and this is the Nathan Rouse spring of 2018 coming to this movie with the thoughts, feelings, views on the world I have, things that I hold as valuable and what I kind of want to see more of in film. The movie feels like a story, and your theme that you just brought up a minute ago, this is why this is a perfect bridge of theme. Your theme you brought up just a minute ago even more richly conveys this. It feels like it feels like a question. It feels like it's asking a question. Why should you have hope in the middle of an apocalypse? And the expression of that hope in this story, at least how I interpreted it, was a family's attempt to thrive with an with a literal destructive apocalypse outside, and a figurative but no less monumental apocalypse of it within their four walls, and that being the loss of this child so tragically. And so to me, the movie is about the family, and maybe it's me as a dad in the way that some people of a different demographic may key in on how the so-and-so was represented or portrayed, or the actions that they performed in a given piece of media. Maybe it was just me keying in on this, but I felt like it was an unnecessary plot point in a movie that feels incredibly tightly wound and well executed, that I think, and you and I, for listeners who want this information, I even hypothesized a version where this could play out very similarly to how the movie concludes, with him surviving that attack. But I just think the movie's heartbeat is how does this family move forward? And I think that idea and that question is asked by the removal and the taking away of their son. So that's all the loss I need as a viewer to understand for this family. And so then when you remove the father, it felt unnecessary to me in terms of the significance it has on the remainder of the narrative and the importance to those characters. But that, again, I know that I had a hard time convincing you of that idea.
Well, I think that the biggest thing for me is, and when you and I had chatted about it briefly, for me, it didn't bother me at all. And I would understand if someone were to ding it for conventionality. I mean, I do recognize, even in a moment when it happens, when so many other wonderful things are happening, I would not knock any listener who was like, well, of course the dad's going to die. Of course the dad dies. It's that is a very familiar plot beat. And again, in an otherworld movie where he is merely wounded and incapacitated, so that we still get the final ending that we get, because holy cow, that final shot is just phenomenal. So in another world scenario where he gets to potentially survive being severely wounded but incapacitated, so that we still have that final shot. Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that, but it didn't bother me, particularly because of what he says to her in, right before he goes. Like I think the emotional beat of the moment is right. Which, by the way, supposedly the original script. I'm just a wealth of trivial bits on this one. I didn't even realize I knew this much.
You're kind of a wealth of trivial bits just generally in life. And
that is true.
Yeah.
It is true. But supposedly the original script, even Krasinski's version, simply had the dad saying "I love you," and that was it. Millicent, I need to look up her last name. I know her first name is Millicent, but the deaf daughter, the actress is. Give me one moment and I'll have it. The actress is Millicent Simmons. She suggested to Krasinski that he say to her, not only "I love you," "I have always loved you," and that is the line I think that yanked the tears from my eyeballs and really got me for that is that whole "I have always loved you," because of the significance for that character to say that to his daughter at that moment. And there is something to this notion of going out with a primal scream kind of thing. Yeah. I think there's something there to be scratched about, like, I'm going to go down fighting, as it were, even though I know I'm going to lose, but I'm gonna get something from this moment, and I'm going to save my children. I do think that there's something to that, but no, I mean, I'm not going to kick back too hard against some of what you're suggesting.
Well, and I think I totally understand, and I can assign value or see value in the execution as it is, what we actually do get. For me personally, and again, I can recognize I'm bringing a lot to what I sort of wanted based on what began establishing itself in the film and how I interpreted it. It just felt like this is a really random incorporation to make here, but I was just in the Disney store the other day, so this property is on my brain. It's kind of like You referenced the final beat of Emily Blunt on screen, going full Ripley or full Linda Hamilton, Terminator, which
great.
is just so fantastic. And I think I just missed the Krasinski character being present for that moment in the way that, like, again, this is totally random and I get it. Imagine like the end of The Incredibles and the Underminer showing up, and we're kind of energized by the emotionality of the family finally having a unified front against the threat. And like, Mr. Incredible died, but Mr. Incredible died 10 minutes ago, and you're like, well, yes, but it's like,
yeah, no, it's like, I understand, but I think I had said this to you, and I really do want to get to themes, so I don't want to camp out here too long. But
on my stupid point, is that what you're saying?
Well, no, I'm not going to call your point stupid. But I do think that, again, in this otherworld version, I don't know how Krasinski surviving impacts, dilutes, or affects, like you talked about pulling the punch with the talking scene earlier,
sure,
and that kind of dilutes the power and potency of the scene that he has dialogue with Emily Blunt. I don't know. I don't know the answer to this question, but one of my speculations is I wonder how his surviving dilutes moments like Emily Blunt's Linda Hamilton moment, the discovery of the hearing aids down there, and the discovery of how much time and effort he's put into, investing into his daughter's hearing and all of those kinds of things.
Yes,
I don't know how it affects.
I think those are legitimate question marks that I would happily address. Only one of them though, because I've done some of them off pod already, but only one of them is, to me, well, I would reverse the question and say what is gained narratively by his loss right there that might not be able to be accomplished in some different fashion. But how much, this is just purely hypothesis, of course, at this point. To me, there's something pretty, you've got an already singular moment, perhaps made even more, pardon the word, badass, in Blunt's final moment. If she is now if Krasinski's, wounded and huddled, you're subverting the type by now she is the heroic protector of the children and the.
Yeah.
But again, that's purely just off the cuff. Anyway, those are purely just sort of thoughts I had about things I might, adjust if it were me. But again, I love the movie. I just didn't think the dad had to die.
You just wanted him to be around.
I did. I did.
I get it.
I don't. It's the deadbeat dad. He's literally dead.
I miss him too. I miss him too.
I want to survive the movie, Reed. I just want to survive the movie. I'm projecting. I want to survive. Okay. I want my kids to know I love them, but I want to survive.
Well, and that's the thing is because she says to him, and I think that's what's crucial about it is she says to him, what are we if we can't protect them? What good are we if we can't protect them? And it's like I mentioned earlier, he witnesses their young son get taken, and he puts on the brakes,
right?
And in that opening shot, and I can foresee, and I'm trying to steer us into theme here. I can foresee, this notion of he's been severely challenged by what his wife has said. His wife speculating that, if she had only been carrying her son, if she had only been, all of these what ifs, if she had only been carrying him, then maybe, nothing bad would have happened to him. And then she makes the speculation. She said, what are we if we can't protect them?
Right.
And she says, promise me that you will protect them.
Right.
And he's wounded. He's hurt. And so it's one of those things where he's witnessing, he's looking at this thing trying to get into the truck after his, two of only 3 remaining children. And it could potentially get both of them right there in that moment. So I can foresee him going like, I am going to give everything I have left to give to literally everything that I have left to give them a shot at getting away. Because what am I if I can't protect them? And I wanted him to survive too, but I think that's something that the film is really dealing with on a larger scale about this idea of, there's all kinds I was surprised to find out how many political and social interpretations people have brought to this film. There's tons of things that people have said about like, oh, is it a metaphor for a society in which you can't use your voice? Is it? And I'm like, oh my, or where you're like hunted down for speaking your voice and all kinds of things. They've of course engaged, which I kind of quasi did myself, engaged the idea of like a pro-life sentiment because they're bringing a baby into this, this one scenario that they can't possibly, logically justify bringing a baby into. But I think to me, the thing that really stood out is these depths that we'll go to try to keep our worlds safe and to try to keep our children and our families safe, and how much is so completely out of control and so how much is out of your hands in terms of keeping them safe, keeping them happy, keeping them whole, trying to do what's right for them, trying to do what's good for them. Like, that's so much of what resonated to me about the film is that whole notion of just doing everything you possibly can to see your children safe and to see your family survive whatever apocalypse is going through. And it was really potent, and it was really moving and challenging and heartbreaking and inspiring and all these other sort of words that I could hurl at it to think about those kinds of things.
Well, and I am a strident respecter of the don't have your phone out in the theater rules, but that line, who are we if we can't protect them, the moment I think she says it first. Yeah, maybe she's the only one who says it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she's the only one who says it.
I took my phone out and I was like, that's it. That is the everything of this movie. Who are we if we can't protect them? And it's funny you referenced the pro-life thing and the using your voice kind of thing. I'd actually seen, I wasn't going to bring it up, but you mentioned that. I'd seen like a, this is pro 2A thing. I'm like, come on, y'all. Like, just can a story just be a story?
Pro 2A thing?
Second Amendment.
Oh, That thing.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
Yeah.
And, I don't totally know where I'm going to go with this sentence, but I think you just really imbued about 15 minutes ago this idea that, what I wrote down, and I don't know what you might have remaining other than response. I don't know, but the sentence I wrote is, you have to have babies in an apocalypse. And I don't know that means literal babies. So I don't know that I'm like the person who's like, yes, this is a pro-life movie about when the stuff's hitting the fan, you just gotta keep having the baby. I don't know that I would intend that sentence literally, though. I don't know that I wouldn't either. I think what I would say that I think is so powerful about this movie, and a baby is an iconic emblem of that powerful thing, is hope in the midst of great suffering, loss, and devastation.
Yeah. Oh, indeed. Indeed.
And I think that's a really powerful, and maybe why people are so responding so strongly to this particular movie. Why would you have a baby in these sorts of circumstances? Well, yeah, sure, that's a legitimate question, but we can also track the arc of the movie and recognize these are very responsible people who have worked tirelessly to build a soundproof bunker in the bottom of their home, specifically for the purposes of being able to bring a baby into this devastated world. And I think maybe even further than you have to have babies in apocalypse is you have to figure out how to friggin' protect the babies in the middle of the apocalypse.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, follow these tendrils wherever you want. Like, the people, if these characters who had, in the face of losing that child, just thrown in the towel and just let the monsters come, what a terrible, that is a story that provides some interesting conversation at some point in our world. It is not the story of a person of faith. Mm-hmm. Right? The story of a person of faith is to say, it's all gone to hell. I'm still going to figure out a way to bring the kingdom right here.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
I think that's just a really powerful, beautiful statement that regardless of my misgivings about Dad's absence.
And I think of two things. First of all, you and I are both rabid fans of the film Children of Men, which I think says a similar thing.
I thought it, but I wasn't going to invoke it because I know I beat that drum a lot. But you go right ahead. I'm happy to respond to it. Yeah,
of course. But the other thing is there's a direct line. So there's the whole film Children of Men. If you haven't seen Children of Men, go see Children of Men because it's amazing and a wonderful film and I love it. But there's also the line in the first season, I think it's like episode 3, of the new version of Battlestar Galactica, the most recent version of Battlestar Galactica, where they're talking about they're trying to survive. The Cylons are taking over. They're running on this mission trying to find New Earth and find Earth and all of these kinds of things. But I remember Captain Adama says at one point to someone, I think it's Captain Adama who says this line. He says, talking about the low morale on the ship and how everybody is hopeless. And then he looks around and he says, people got to start having babies. Yeah, and he's talking about relationship, in general, it's like there's something that needs to come from this. And I think there's a very real, very spiritual, very deeply rooted in the human psyche an understanding of the hopefulness that a baby brings to everything, to the possibility. But like you said, it is also the pending question of, well, can we protect them when they arrive? Can we? And that's one of the things that I think every parent, every thoughtful, reflective parent probably goes through at some point. Maybe there's some out there who already know they're going to be amazing moms and dads, but there's the time where you come and you say, like, am I going to screw up this kid? Because and I'm not even talking about like external threats, which I'll get to in a second, but like, am I gonna be a bad dad?
Right.
Am I gonna be a bad mom? Am I gonna be the one who, when he or she needs me so desperately to be one thing, am not going to read the signs, am not going to understand what's next, and am I going to just swerve left when I should have stayed the course or turned right? And that's the fear, that's the dread. Am I going to be responsible for my child as an adult having to take years and years of therapy, or go off and do some horrible thing because I wasn't enough? And even more so than that, it's like you think about all of the tragedies that take place in the world and how ugly and awful the world can be, and it's like I can't protect them from all of that. I cannot protect them from everything. And one of the reasons why, I'm seriously not combating or casting down your observation here, I'm just saying one of the reasons why, Krasinski's, death scene, even though I do love the idea of a other world version in which he survives, is his death scene is he's standing there and he's like, I cannot fix everything. Sure, I cannot control everything, but I can do two things in this moment. I can let her know that I love her, and I can give them a chance to get away.
Right.
And in that moment, that's enough. And sometimes, as a parent, that's all you've got. Yep. Sometimes all you've got is, I don't know if this is going to be right. I don't know if this is going to be good. I don't know if it's going to work or if it's going to be helpful. But all I can do is let them know I love them and give them a chance to get out of this situation, or give them a chance to do something different, or to escape, or to something. And that, to me, it still rattles around in my heart as a deeply profound, deeply perilous kind of journey. We talked extensively in our episode a couple years ago now at this point about Witches, about the comic by Scott Snyder, Witches, talking about that line where he said, don't ever have them because it's like an organ just leaped out of your body and is walking around and just, I think I read somewhere else where they say, parenting is signing up to just being terrified for the rest of your life all the time. That's all it is. And I do think there's some legitimacy to that, but I think that's one of the things that I do find, like, let's think about this. Let's explore this for a second. The reason why he doesn't want her to go on these excursions, this is implied. This is what I get from the film, because it's not directly stated. The reason why he doesn't want his deaf daughter to go on these excursions is because she can't hear if she accidentally cracks a twig or makes a noise or something. Like, she can't hear. She's not equipped to hear if she needs to divert or hide or something like that. She is, in this world, completely blind, even though deaf is her impairment. She's unable to navigate this because she can't look out, quote unquote, for sound.
Sure.
And one of the reasons why he's so desperately trying to get a hearing aid that works is so she can. It's for her survival. Now, that's my reading on what he's doing for her. It's not pure benevolence that he just wants her to be able to hear, although I'm sure that's an element. It's that he wants her to have a shot at survival.
Right.
That's what he wants for her. And little does he know, man, little does he know that all of his efforts, all of his failed efforts, are actually what gives her and their whole family a shot at survival.
Sure.
And what a beautiful and powerful thought to think that even the times that we would look at, and I speak this to every mother and father out there listening to it, I speak it to you, I speak it to myself as much as anything else, that with the grace of God, all of our failed attempts, all of the attempts that we look at and we go, well, I screwed that up. I shot that up. I didn't do well there. Who knows? But what somewhere down the line, if they know we love them and they know that we're trying to give them a shot at things, but what we may be planting seeds or laying the groundwork for them to have a path out, for them to have a path forward.
Sure.
And that's a beautifully hopeful notion to me, to think that, all of those screwed up hearing aids, all of those hearing aids that didn't work, that he didn't give her, that is ultimately what, combined with Emily Blunt's, cracking the shotgun, that's what's going to give them the edge over these creatures. Sure. And I'm just like, that's powerful. That was his gift to them, is he, through all of what that's my statement, through all of what he died believing were failures, he gave his family the chance they needed to survive. And I find that powerful.
Yeah.
I find that beautiful. Yeah. A Quiet Place. I have one more thing that I want to say, because I know we need to wind down, but I think there's a notion that every parent wrestles with and struggles with, And I think there's something that it is as a legitimate question. I think you and I have both recited it rather dismissively, but it is a valid question. Why would you bring a child into this scenario? Why would you bring a child into this situation? Why would you bring a child into this world? Why would you do that? Why would you bring in a child into this world when they're, going to have no shot at life, when they're going to have a deficient station? All these what ifs, what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. And I think there is something of the nature of trust at the root of that question, specifically the question of can we as parents be trusted?
Sure.
Can we be trusted? You said, again, going back to it's funny that this is coming up so much, going back to the witches episode, to quote Mr. Nathan Rouse, you said the danger with children is that they trust you.
Yeah. They
do trust you. And so you have to be a good steward of that trust to a certain degree. And each and every human being on the planet knows, I'm a screw up in a lot of ways. I am in many ways not trustworthy. And I think getting to something very deliberately spiritual, that question is frequently asked. I think one of the main reasons why people find faith difficult is because I think it's a question that we ask of ourselves, and that we ask, that the world asks of us, is, can your God be trusted? Don't even bother with whether or not he exists. Can he be trusted? Have you seen how many things there are in the world that can kill you? Have you seen how many things there are in the world that want to kill you, and that, all of these different, disparate things? Can your God be trusted? And I think that's one thing that I struggle with a lot, because when we wrestle with things in our household, when we have some conflicts or some difficulties, I'm constantly at war between the camp that says God is trustworthy, God will take care of us, God will be there for us, God will be in the midst of it, and the other side that's but what if he doesn't?
Right.
But what if he isn't? There's plenty of stories out there. There's a mountain of stories out there that didn't quite go the happy ending route that we would so long to believe that all of them do or would. And before I invite some thoughts from you, I just want to go ahead and bring in the scripture that I had in notion for this. Is speaking of this notion of trust and this notion of fighting for us and doing all he can for us. I thought of Exodus chapter 14, which is when the people of Israel had already escaped slavery in Egypt, but they were stuck between Pharaoh's army and the Red Sea. And this is what Moses said to the people before raising his staff and parting the Red Sea. In Exodus chapter 14 and verse 13, it says, Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again." Verse 14 says, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only be silent." And one of the things that I was thinking about when I was thinking about this movie, obviously the connection to being silent and being still, but also this notion of, I love the phrasing in that passage of scripture where it says, "The Egyptians you see here today, you will never see again." It doesn't say in that passage of scripture, you'll never see trouble again.
Sure.
You'll never see problems again. And I think that there is a hopefulness. I'll say this as briefly as I can, and then I'll invite your response and we'll wind down. I think there is a hopefulness to recognizing, you know what? I don't know if I'm going to be enough for the long haul. Maybe, and this is, again, getting back to this Krasinski moment, maybe I'm not going to be enough to protect them forever. I can't be enough to protect them forever. I can't be enough to guide them forever. I can't get every statement right. I can't get every moment right. But if I have the courage and the strength and the faith and the hope, maybe I can be enough for right now. Maybe I can be enough for this moment. And maybe the monsters, the scary things, the Egyptians that we see right here, right now, we will not see again. Maybe this problem right here, I can be enough for this. And I think sometimes the only faith and trust that we have in the Lord, and the only faith and trust we can have in ourselves, is simply saying, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen 5 years from now. I don't know what's going to happen 10 years from now. I don't know if there are more monsters out there. I don't know how many of them there are or if we'll ever beat them. But if you can be here in this moment, and if you can be enough in this moment, maybe that will win it. Maybe that will get it through. Just maybe all we need is faith enough for this one moment. Maybe not for the long haul, but just enough for tomorrow, or just enough, God bless us, for today. So anyway, those are I think I've spent my thoughts on Quiet Place. For the moment.
You know what's funny is I remember thinking about the movie before I knew what the end was, and I was like, wow, this is a really interesting sort of meditation on stillness and solitude, and establishing sort of a peaceful, a tranquil kind of quietude about us. And then I'm like, oh, but the movie ends suggesting that it's all noise that's going to save us. I was like, oh, well, okay, maybe not, but I can still roll with it. Yeah. Just the right frequency of noise. I think you laid a pretty firm foundation there with your rather erudite treatment of the conversation just a second ago, of whether it's the Moses story on through the recognition of a present moment. As a parent and as one who probably screws up a lot more than I'm willing to cop to, I think there's so much grace in the sort of lilies of the field idea. That I work in a sales environment, and a sales environment, the language of goals is talked about constantly.
Yeah.
And I think the language of goals is a positive language for a production-based economy. But there is a point where a kingdom-based economy that says you really don't know.
Yeah, right.
Let's not even bother with 10 years from now. You don't know. I was taking my 3 children, all under the age of 10, in the car on a very rainy evening through the streets of Charlotte, and I had a destination in the GPS, and I came upon a terrible wreck tonight. Wow. And you do your best to help to try to obscure the imagery from your kids,
right?
And divert the path, and I wasn't present when it happened. It had probably been like a minute earlier, the ambulance was not there yet or anything. Traffic had begun to build, and I diverted us down another path, and those moments are so sobering, because you're like. Yeah. You want to turn around and tell that car full of kids, say, I love you, and I'm going to do everything I can to give you a shot.
Yes.
But that's really all I got. That is about the sum of my contribution to your life. Yes. And you it's very possible you'll end up in therapy one day, and a lot of it will be about me. But I think what I would try to instill now, and what a therapist worth their money, kid, would tell you is the implication there. Get a therapist worth their money, but exactly. Is we do what we can and what we know with the resources we have, and it is a fool's errand to try to expect of oneself an utterly distilled purity of heart. It's just you're not going to be there.
Yeah,
but. As Eugene Peterson coins, it's that long obedience in the same direction.
Yes.
It's that constant reminder to your children, I love you, I've always loved you. This little thing I'm doing right now is purely just to buy you some more time, and to give you another shot, and to let you know that in the middle of apocalypse, it's okay to have hope.
Yes.
And it's okay to laugh. And it's definitely okay to cry. And it's definitely okay to be sad, but our hope is not drawn off of circumstance, and is not drawn off of what we see and what we can touch, and especially what we can hear even.
Yes, yes.
And so it is that calling that some may call foolish, and that's okay. It's Scripture itself sort of invokes that language a bit, the foolishness of what we put our faith in, but
I
don't know. That's a long-winded sort of way of just sort of affirming what you are scratching after, that you aren't going to be able to right all the wrongs, mend all the bruises.
Right.
scare off all the monsters.
Yeah,
you're just not.
Yeah,
and you may lose your life in the attempt, but the loss of that life is going to be the present reminder to them that you are and always have loved them.
Yes.
So,
yes.
On that note, Reed Lackey, shall we? It's a good thing David Pumpkins doesn't go to the theater. He'd probably be very disruptive during A Quiet Place.
Yeah. Any questions?
So let's bring in old David Pumpkins.
Let's do it.
So if you're new to this episode, this is kind of a long one. I apologize, but if you're new, that's probably because you came on the Forasteros bandwagon, and that was a 2-hour episode. So
yeah, so there it is.
This is actually kind of short to you, maybe. Every episode where we cover a particular feature film, generally speaking, we end up rating it on a scale of David S. Pumpkins, the infamous Tom Hanks SNL Halloween character. We rank these in a category of style, scares, and substance. On the subject of style, Reed, this is a 5. I mean, I can't. It has been I am predisposed to the MCU type stuff, to have some exhilaration on those things, and there remains the possibility that repeat viewings of A Quiet Place might yield diminishing returns, and I can understand that. But for a property out of nowhere that really had little sort of built up cachet, how do we say that word?
Cachet.
Sort of predisposition towards expectation, that was a hell of a ride in a movie theater.
Oh yes, absolutely. 5 for me as well. I don't even need to qualify it. I loved this film. I thought this was special. I'm gonna revisit it. I'm gonna own it. I'm gonna watch it probably every Halloween, and anytime that I need a good shot in the arm to remind myself of hopefulness in an apocalyptic wasteland. So yes, 5 for me.
What about scares for you?
23. Because that's
wow.
No, sincerely,
I don't know that you've ever attempted to break the scale like that.
No, sincerely, this is a solid 5 for me for scares, because some of the concept is so tense, and they had some phenomenal scares just in the sequence of the film. I cannot remember a time when I was more just nerve-wracked in the theater than the water flooding into their little underground bunker and with the baby, and I was just, oh my gosh, yeah, but then that's also the bathtub scene, and the daughter wandering out in the middle of the woods, and just every 5 minutes of the movie, it was terrifying. Yes, 5 for me for scares.
I wasn't totally confident I was sort of joking at the top of the episode of 5's on the line, but we may land there. I mean, when this movie opens with that child's loss and the bar all of a sudden goes to 11, and you're like, oh my God, wait a minute, what did I just buy a ticket to? And it does not really slow down or let off the gas. Nope. And takes the turns sharply and deftly, and there's nails through the feet, and there's bloodied bathtubs, and restrained screams that cannot be held any longer, and fireworks going off. Like I had as strong a physical reaction to this movie as one I can think of in a very long time. I'm giving it a 5 for scares.
Yes, absolutely.
And, maybe I'd name it thrills, but they kind of fit the same bucket.
Yeah.
As far as substance goes, I just feel so generous of spirit, even with my things that I might quibble on. I think sort of our conversation has lent some a refined look at even those elements. It's hard not to want to give it a 5, so I'm going to give it a 5, Reed.
Yeah, I'm giving it a 5. I'm giving it 5s down the line. This is a wonderful movie. This is a wonderful movie. This is I think only the third time that we have officially given on The Fear of God a solid 10 out of 10 David S. Pumpkins to a film. I think and
so listeners know, we don't pre-brief these numbers. No. Typically, I don't know if you write them down beforehand. Mine are of the moment, usually.
Mine are of the moment. Because they're usually, I want them to be informed by the conversation, because they may have shifted by the conversation.
Right.
So yeah, this is only the third time that we've done. I mean, we've given a few 9s and a few 9.5s, but 10 out of 10 has only gone to Alien and 7, and then now A Quiet Place. So it's in good company.
What it takes? Do you know what Take Shelter got? I'd have to look.
I think Take Shelter. I think Take Shelter might have gotten a 9, maybe a 9.5. I can't remember. It was high. It wasn't a solid 10.
Regardless,
but
yeah.
But yeah. Oh man.
Well, Reed, thank you.
I'm
glad we got to sort of live text each other during. What's so funny about that day is, of course, texting you in the middle of a movie theater during A Quiet Place, and then watching the clock because I knew what time you were going to the movie.
Yes,
and we're 3 hours difference. And I remember I'm like, all right, probably in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to hear from Reed. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Nathan, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And listeners, thank you as always for tuning in. And you've been so generous and gracious in your comments and your feedback. We would love to hear from you on this episode, some of the stuff we brought up, some of your specific thoughts about it. So yeah, send us an email, send us a comment on Facebook. You can listen at during the credits to find out exactly how to get in touch with us. And yeah, Nathan, thanks again.
No problem, man. We'll see you guys next week. Have a good one.
Bye, guys.
The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but it is not the end of the conversation. To continue this conversation, you can follow us on Twitter @TheFearOfGod. Visit us on Facebook to comment on one of our posts or to post there yourself. You can follow Reed on Twitter @ReedLackey. You can follow Nathan on Twitter @TheNathanRouse. Visit morethanonelesson.com to leave a comment on this post or any of the official episode posts. Email us at fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com. That's all one word, fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com. And last but not least, if you listen to us through iTunes, we would greatly appreciate a rating or a review. Thank you for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next week.